Hey everyone, quick discussion of three of the homework problems from 2-1 that I did not post answers for. Um, so right away to number two. I've drawn a sketch of the given information in number two, again, because it's going to give me some sense of where point O should be. 51 comma 18 for point U. So 51 is a lot farther in the X direction than 18 is in the Y direction. So there's a good location for you. And then V is only 24 in the X, only about halfway towards you, and 35 in the Y, almost twice as much as the 18. So there's the U, there's the V, and it says V is the midpoint. So if V is in the middle of U and some other point, that other point's got to be up here somewhere, pretty close to the X axis, maybe even a negative coordinate. I can't really tell from my drawing because my drawing is not super accurate, but it doesn't need to be. It's giving me the clue that the X coordinate should be close to zero, maybe a little positive, maybe a little negative, and the Y coordinate should obviously be larger than either the U or the V, either the 18 or the 35. So it gives me a sense of what the correct answer should look like. It's a way of checking that when I do get an answer, that my answer makes some sense. But I'm using the formula approach. I really encourage you to use the formula approach for a problem like this. So I'm calling the coordinates of the unknown point x comma y. And then here I am averaging the x coordinate of the missing point with the x coordinate of u, which is 51. I'm averaging those two coordinates to get the coordinate, the x coordinate of the midpoint. I showed this in the notes in lesson 2-1, right? So I'm not going to take a lot of time going over this way of doing the problem again, but I'm averaging the missing endpoint and one endpoint to get the midpoint. Y is the same thing. I'm averaging the missing coordinate with the other endpoint coordinate to get the midpoint and then solving those equations. And oh, look, my x coordinate comes out to be pretty close to zero, slightly negative. Okay? Same thing, same exact thing with number four. Again, I just sketched negative 7, 11, approximately there, 8 comma 5, approximately there, and T is the midpoint. You know what my guess is? My guess is a lot of you did not read these problems carefully, did not read that one of the points that I was giving you was the midpoint, and that you just assumed that I was giving you two endpoints and asking you to find the point in between those two. So the lesson there would be read the problems carefully, okay? So if T is the midpoint and M is one endpoint, then the other endpoint's got to be over there somewhere. Again, somewhere close to the x-axis, close to zero for a y coordinate. Could be a little bit positive or a little bit negative. Now, when I use the formula approach, I get 23, negative 1, and those numbers confirm my sense of where the answer is from the sketch. And in fact, the y coordinate turns out to be slightly negative. Number 6, I don't think there's really any way anybody is going to solve this problem. Almost nobody is going to solve this problem unless you use this formula approach. And again, giving yourself a picture, even though I have no idea where m comma n is in relation to the origin, okay, what the problem is telling me is that, let's see, A is the midpoint. So I put A in between B and C. It really doesn't matter at all that if I know if B and C are like this, or if C's over there and B's over. What matters is that A is the midpoint. And that makes it clear to me then that I have to average the M and the 12 to get 8, average the N and the M to get 20. Okay. Now, you might still even have reasoned that much in your head and then said to yourself, yeah, how do I average M and 12? The same way you average any two numbers. You add them up and divide by 2. And again, you might have gotten stuck and saying, well, I can't add M to 12. Well, in algebra, you learned that you can add M to 12. The answer to M plus 12 is M plus 12. Okay? So again, you're using the formula and you're plugging everything into the correct place in the formula and then solving, and you get m equals 4. When you plug all the y coordinates into the formula, you can't solve that equation because you've got two variables. But once you solve this one, now you have a value for the m and you plug that in, and then you can finish solving that for the n. Okay, the formula approach, plugging. I can't tell you how often students will say to me, I'm going to turn the camera on my face here. I can't tell you how often students will say to me, Mr. Nortillo, I don't know what to do for this problem. And my experience tells me that when they say, I don't know what to do, what they want to do is to add things or subtract or multiply or divide. To a lot of my students at this point in their math lives, doing something means only adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing. And I've learned when they ask me, I don't know what to do, the answer that they want from me is, well, add these things or multiply these things. And the answer that I give them is not that. The answer that I give them is, there is a formula that relates these things together. What is it? And if they can find the formula, I'll say, well, write it down. That's the first thing you should do. But in their minds, that's still not doing something to solve the problem. But that is the first thing you need to do. Write down the formula. Okay. Second thing, plug all the information that you have into the right places, into the formula. That's doing something. And then once you've done those two things, your knowledge of algebra will tell you what to do next. Okay? And you're going to hear me say that a lot this year. Write down the formula, plug things in where they belong, or recognize there is a relationship here. That's doing something. Okay? The first doing something is not always adding things, multiplying things, subtracting things, or dividing things. So back to the paper. Okay? Again, in this last problem, the first thing to do would be to recognize, it's so important to recognize, A is in the middle of B and C. Okay. Now it says that right up here. I didn't really have to draw the picture, but it helped me. It was easier to keep that in mind looking at it in the picture than constantly going back and rereading the words. It was easier for me to decide where this M, this 12, and this 8 go in the formula when I had the picture laid out like this. You average these two and get the 8. And then the next thing I did was I wrote that equation down. And then my knowledge of algebra told me what to do after that. Okay? All right, let's go on to the lesson for 2.2. If you don't have a printed copy of the notes and you can print it, pause this video, and then come back. All right, I'll assume you have a printed copy of these in front of you. If you can, here's first problem. Wait, no, try these two problems on your own. Try all three. Pause the video, try all three problems, come back. I'll wait. Okay, I assume you've tried the problems now. Let's look at number 1. There are a variety of ways that you can do this problem. Okay. I'm going to demonstrate a way for those of you who maybe found this problem difficult to do. Okay. Now, some of you may have solved this problem and solved it correctly, and it all made sense in your head what you did. But sometimes when I ask students to explain how they did it, they'll explain it, and other students will be shaking their heads going, what? What? I do not understand what you did. And it's okay if you can't explain your approach in a way that makes sense to somebody else. It's okay if somebody else doesn't understand the way that you try to explain it. I'm going to solve it in a way that I think is explainable and understandable to anyone who is having trouble doing this problem. Or maybe you did it and you're going to discover you got the wrong answer. Okay? So my way of doing this problem is to take the point in the far lower left corner of the diagram and call that point 0, 0. It's as if I am creating a set of X and Y axes for this problem. And maybe it's even worth drawing a vertical and horizontal line and call that point 0, 0. And then label what the coordinates would be for these other points. Maybe not all of them, but at least the ones that are important to us in this problem. We have to deal with T and J and B, and gosh, here's the B. A is the point that we're having to find. Well, we've just labeled B, 0, 0. How about point T? Well, let's see. To get to T, I got to go 2 miles up, 6 miles over, and another 6 miles up. So that would be 6 miles to the right of the y-axis, an x-coordinate of 6, and then 2 miles plus another 6 is 8 miles up. There's the coordinates of point T. How about point J? Here's point J. It's 10 miles to the right of the origin. That would be 10, 0. See now how you have a very methodical way of finding exactly where point A is now. Point A is half the way from T to J. It's the midpoint of TJ, and we've got a formula that will help us find the midpoint. We want to average the x coordinates. We want to average the y coordinates. This turns out to be 8, 4. That's the location of point A. Now the question is, how do you get from B to A? Well, B is at 0, 0. A is at 8, 4. Okay. When it says give your answer in terms of north, south, east, and or west distances, I would say from B to A, you've got to go, let's see, 8 miles to the east and another 4 miles north, or 4 miles north and then 8 miles east. But, we usually give the x coordinate or x direction first, but it really doesn't matter to me. You could say 4 miles north and 8 miles east, or you could say 8 miles east and 4 miles north. Either would be fine with me, okay? But what you can't tell me is to go 4 miles south and 8 miles west. That would be going from A to B, not from B to A. The direction matters to me, okay? And here's what I'm definitely not asking you to do. I'm definitely not asking you to find that exact distance or describe to me that direction. I mean, you could say that direction from B to A is like northeast, but it's not exactly in the middle of north and east. It's a little closer to east than it is north. How many degrees is that angle? I don't know. I'm not asking you. Okay. So I'm not asking you to find that distance there. You might even know how to do it. And if you don't, you're going to learn how to find this distance later this year. But that's not what I'm asking you. I'm just asking you for an east and north combination. Okay? There's our final answer. Same thing, I'm going to switch to a red pen here and do this problem here just so you can see my work in red. C is halfway from K to L. Well, where's K? It's here. I need coordinates for that. 10 miles to the right of the origin. And how tall is this? Well, it's 2 miles up and 6 miles up. That's a total of 8. So 10, 8. Of course, this y coordinate, 8, should be the same as that y coordinate, 8. Right? So there's K. And where's L? L is here. It's 2 miles above the origin. So 0, 2. How do you get from J to C? Oh, wait a minute. C is halfway from K to L. I haven't even found C yet, from K to L. All right, so C is halfway between K and L. It's the midpoint of KL. Again, others of you may not have used this coordinate system and may know exactly what you're doing and getting the correct answer. But I really like this coordinate method of doing the problem because I think everybody can learn to do it this way. So C is about there. What are its coordinates? Well, it'd be the average of 0 and 10, and then the average of 2 and 8. So that becomes 5, 5. There's the coordinates of point C. Okay. Now, if I'm trying to get from J to C, J is at 10, 0. C is at 5, 5. So I'm going from J to C, from 10 to 5, that means I got to go 5 miles to the west. 5 miles west. Okay. And then again, from J to C, 5 miles west, and then 5 miles north. West and north. It cannot be east and south. That would be going in the opposite direction from C to J. Okay. All right. And then finally, problem number 3. And as I said, not related to the diagram above, R is the midpoint of JZ. Hey, you know what's really going to help? Draw a picture for yourself. You're going to hear me say this 1,000 times this year too. This is a geometry class. If a problem doesn't give you a picture, it is very often a good idea to draw a picture. R is the midpoint of JZ. So I'll draw a J and a Z. Gosh, I'm reminded there was one other thing in the homework assignment from 2-1 I got to go back and cover that I forgot about in the lesson. J, Z, and R is the midpoint. So make R look like it's the midpoint. Now here's 2 ways that you can mark the diagram to show anybody else who's looking at the diagram that you intend for R to be not just somewhere in the middle, but the exact middle. You can either mark it like this, and this is what I was just talking about. We just put a couple of, we call these tick marks in mathematics. As long as the marks are identical, what they're telling you is that this distance and this distance are the same. It does not matter how many marks there are. I could put 2 marks there and 2 marks there. That doesn't mean that these segments are 2 units long each. It only means that, hey, these segments are the same length because they're marked the same way. Okay, I could use a triple tick mark and a triple tick mark, and it still means exactly the same thing, that these 2 segments have the same length. But here's another way to do it. Call that X, put an X there, put an X there. The same variable for both segments tells us that these lengths are the same. We don't know what they are yet, but we know they're the same, and that's important to solving this problem. Okay. Now, Z is the midpoint of RA. Okay, well, Z, that's in the middle of R and A. So A has got to be out here somewhere, same distance from Z that R is. So I'll put an A out there, extend the line, call it A, and this segment is the same length as this one. So I could use that same triple mark, or I could use another X. Okay. And finally, A is the midpoint of JP. So A is the same distance from J as it is from P. So P must be way out here somewhere because it's got to be the same distance from A as A is from J. Because A is the midpoint between these 2. Okay. Now, for this, since it's the same length as this segment, and this segment is X plus X plus X, I'm going to call it 3X. Okay. I would not put now 9 little tick marks in this segment. That is not a way of showing that this segment's length is the same as these 3 combined. Okay, we don't do that in math. If I put 9 little tick marks there, all that tells us, this is just the rules of how we interpret math diagrams. I didn't make these rules up. Okay, if I put 9 tick marks in there, all that tells us is that this segment's length is different from any of these. It does not tell us that this segment's length is these 3 combined. Okay, I could put 5 tick marks in there, and it would mean the same thing, just that this segment is different from any of these 3. Okay, but in fact, we know that this segment is 3 times as long as this. A 3x is the best way to show that in your diagram. Now, PZ is 20 units long. From P to Z is 20 units long. Well, look, the x's are going to help me solve this problem now. Because here's a 3x and another x. That's a total of 4x units. So 4x is equal to that 20. That makes x equal 5. Now I can find the length of absolutely any segment in this diagram. How long is JP? Well, it's 3x, 4x, 5x, 6x. 6x must be 30. JP must be 30 units long. But we could find out how long RA is, how long JA is, how long RP is because we have a value for x now. There is a problem in the homework associated with this lesson where you need to draw a picture and you should put some x's in. And the problem I've given in the homework is even tougher than this one. And this one's tough enough, I think, the first time you have to do one on your own. But the one in the homework's even tougher. I would recommend using x's and at some point using a second variable, maybe a y or a w or an a or something like that. I think it's going to require the use of two different variables eventually for you to make sense out of it and solve it. Okay. I want to go back to homework 2-1 and talk about one other thing that I completely forgot to talk about in the lesson. It's not a big deal right now, but I don't want to overlook it. Here's a diagram where, again, you see these sets of identical tick marks. So in this diagram, what these double tick marks are telling you is that segment ED is the same length as segment EA. And these single tick marks are telling you that the length of CD is the same as the length of CB. Okay. Here's what the tick marks are not telling you. Are you listening to me? Here's what they're not telling you. This double tick mark is not telling you that this segment, ED, is twice as long as this segment with a single tick mark in it. The numbers of slashes don't tell us anything about the relative lengths of two segments. In fact, this double tick mark doesn't even tell us that this segment is any longer than this one. That's not what the tick marks indicate to us. Okay? Tick marks are the only thing they tell us is which segments are equal to each other in measure. Okay? And for this homework problem, I'm sure you saw the answer that I gave was point E is a midpoint of segment AD, and that is the only correct answer to this question. You might have answered that C is a midpoint of BD, and that is simply wrong, and I'm going to show you why. I actually want to pull up the answers to this so I don't draw on these notes here. Okay. C is not a midpoint of BD. I'm going to write that down. C, midpoint of BD, question mark. First of all, segment BD is not even drawn in this diagram, but that doesn't mean we couldn't draw it. But if we drew it, it would be this straight segment from B directly to D. C is not a midpoint of this segment because it's not on the segment. Okay? We might use this word to describe how C compares to B and D. We might say that C is equidistant. Equidistant, E-Q-U-I, equi, meaning equal, of course, and distant, referring to the distances. This point is the same distance from B as it is from D. That's true, but it is not a midpoint of segment BD. A midpoint, by definition, must be on the segment connecting those 2 points. Okay? So that explains that. And I think that covers everything. Good luck with the homework. We'll see you next time.